In addition to having published nearly 50 articles on Brülosophy.com, co-hosting even more episodes of this podcast, and joining Martin on the Brülosophy Show since becoming a contributor just 2.5 years ago, Jordan Folks continues to engage heavily in the beer and brewing community while brewing some truly incredible beers as well. As Brülosophy's resident traditionalist, which I say wholly endearingly, Jordan offers a very unique perspective to the crew, especially when it comes to experiment design. There's no denying that Brülosophy is what it is today, in part due to the obsession that Jordan shares with us about brewing and beer, as well as his dedication to helping others want to learn more about this beverage that we love so much. Back in June, Jordan took the time to field questions from patrons for our monthly live Q&A session, and this week we're going to be sharing that session with all of you, not only as a way for listeners to get to know Jordan a little bit better, but also to give you an idea of what you might get for throwing as little as $3 per month our way. If you're unfamiliar with Patreon, it's a really neat platform that frankly allows us to keep bringing you this podcast every week. Those people who appreciate what it is that we do enough to make a small monthly pledge are known as patrons, and in return for their support, we give them a little something extra as a way to say thanks. You can learn all about the various rewards we offer patrons over at patreon.com/Brülosophy, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, except for to say that our two most popular levels of support are the $3 tier, which gets you into these monthly live Q&A sessions with people in the brewing world, and our $5 tier that also gets you a discount at YakimaValleyHops.com. Past Q&A guests have included people like Russian River's Vinny Chilurzo, the Alchemist John Kimmich, and a bunch of homebrewing all-stars like John Palmer and Gordon Strong. Coming up later this month, July of 2025, the executive director of the AHA, Julia Hertz, will be hanging out with patrons, which I'm very excited for, especially given the recent decision for the AHA to disassociate from the Brewers Association. Another perk of being a patron is that they always get to request who it is that they want as guests for these sessions, and we do our best to get those people booked. As for the Yakima Valley Hops discount, they're always worth at least $5, whether it be for hops, gear, or clothes. Again, if you appreciate what it is we're up to and you want to help us to keep doing it, please head over to patreon.com/Brülosophy to learn how you can be rewarded for doing so. Another way you can help us out is by using the links found at Brülosophy.com/support. We are affiliated with most of the places people buy their brewing stuff online, including Amazon, More Beer, and Great Fermentations. When you use those links, which you can also bookmark for future use, we get a really small commission that does help us to cover some of our production costs. And finally, if you wouldn't mind letting us know what you think about this show by leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcast or wherever it is you listen to podcasts that allows you to leave a review, we'd appreciate that as well. In addition to giving us an idea of what listeners think about how we're doing, which we absolutely take to heart, those reviews also make it easier for people who may not have heard of us yet to more easily find the show. Feedback is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who are known for their incredible all-in-one electric brewing systems. I've brewed on both their 120 and 240 volt systems, and I'm telling you, these things are legit, efficient, easy to use, with a relatively small footprint. You're not going to be disappointed with one of these units. Plus, the guys behind the company run a killer YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for Clawhammer Supply. If you're in the market for electric brewing gear, make sure to check out what Clawhammer Supply has to offer over at clawhammersupply.com, and don't forget to let them know Brülosophy sent you when you're checking out. That's clawhammersupply.com. Listener Scott Housel shot us an email that I thought was pretty heartwarming. He said, geez, my wife asked me why I looked a little teary-eyed when I walked in after work one day, and I told her, dang old Brülosophy podcast again. Last time I remember it was the Brew's views on alcoholism. This time, the feedback from a listener about therapy and mental health. You hooked me with all the info and experiments, but also all of the other topics that pop up really have me laughing and nodding and relating. Well, Scott, thank you so much. You know, my friends and family sort of know me for being a bit of a sentimentalist, for better or for worse, and that definitely finds its way onto the podcast at times. It's certainly not our intention to, like drum up negative feelings among our listeners or anything like that, but I'll admit, at least for me, it is very difficult not to at least recognize the uniquely human components in most situations. And that includes brewing and beer. So thank you so much for the validating words, Scott. I really do appreciate it immensely, as I imagine the rest of the contributors do as well. If you have show feedback, you could send it to feedback@Brülosophy.com or drop us a note on social media. Please, if you haven't already, go check out our YouTube channel, The Brülosophy Show. Host Martin Keene has put so much time and effort into this project, and he's got some really cool stuff in store that we're confident everyone listening to this podcast will love. You can find it by going to youtube.com/The @The Brülosophy Show, or simply searching YouTube for Brülosophy. Make sure you subscribe so you're notified when new episodes drop. All right, when we're back from this break, Jordan will be doing live Q&A with patrons of Brülosophy.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? If you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. Choose from hundreds of social casino style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Have you ever thought about adding a port to your kettle but held off because you didn't feel like drilling into your gear or sending it off to have someone else do it? From the makers of the world's fastest counterflow chiller, the Exchillerator, comes the Hangover, the easiest way to add extra ports to your kettle as well as countless other options. Mount a faucet to your keg for easy portable pouring. Set up the perfect whirlpool arm. Hold a heating element in place. All of this and so much more without permanently modifying your gear. Manufactured right here in the United States, the Hangover offers brewers too many convenient solutions to list here. So head over to Exchillerator.com today to see what the Hangover can do for you. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. Massive thanks to Jordan for taking the time to hang out with patrons last month, June of 2025. Just a quick note, we recently transitioned from Facebook to Microsoft Teams for these Q&A sessions, which has been really awesome because it allows patrons to interact directly with the guests. However, we've yet to figure out a good way to fully optimize the audio quality. That's not to say it's bad. I actually spent quite a lot of time tweaking it to sound as good as possible, and I'd say it's probably a little bit better than a typical video call, but it's not perfect, so just a heads up. Alrighty, let's get into Jordan's live Q&A with patrons of Brülosophy.
So this is my first time doing one of these in the new format, but I believe that the way this works is you guys ask me questions and I'll answer them. We can talk about brewing or whatever, so let's get it started. I think the best way would just be to come on off mute and I can field your questions personally like that.
Hey, Jordan, how's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
Good. I got a question about, I was just going through your videos and the one podcast where you're talking about reusing yeast, like straight from the egg. And I've been doing that for a bit. One question I had about like that pitch rate, like you were saying kind of the easiest way to do it was to call, what was it, like 100 milliliters, 200 billion cells?
Yeah.
So what happens with the trub? Like, have you seen different amounts of trub in different batches or different types of beer? Like, do you ever consider that? Or
Yeah, that's a question I've gotten before. And, you know, I'm storing it in a jar, and so you'll see it settle out. And at least in my process, I'm not getting an aggressive amount of trub in the yeast jar. You know, it looks pretty uniform. There might be a couple milliliters on the top that look a little different. The math is actually the shorthand math is actually undercounting a little bit. So I think that the little bit of trub that may be present probably counteracts the fact that we're rounding in the conservative direction. I think the math is actually like 1.2 for every milliliter of yeast slurry in terms of billion cells. So given that we're rounding down and in my experience, there's not that much visible trub, I think that it's close enough.
you think that like that, you said you got it from like a Y East article or something, right?
Yeah. And so the way they had it laid out, and it was all these little vials, and in fact, they were the same vials that they used. I don't know if they still sell in this format, the the dry yeast nutrient that they had, and they had the different like slurry percentages, like 10% slurry, 90% beer, and so on and so forth. And it was like using that, I was able to back calculate how much the pure slurry is worth. And so you can kind of use that to that's where the background math came from.
So the math is more so about the pure slurry, and like, you know, if you do have a considerable amount of trub in there, you should probably consider that. Like,
yeah, I mean, if you, for example, if you were collecting from a dry hop and you can see half of it is hops, that shouldn't count. I don't harvest slurry if dry hops are commingling. But yeah, if you can see a significant amount of slurry, what you could do is you could even decant that off, and then whatever is pure is left is your 200 billion cells per 100 milliliters.
okay, I wonder if you can see it. Do you mind if I just show you real quick?
We can try.
This is a normal batch when I have like not very much beer left in my keg. Like my keg's with, you know, an inch of the dip tube cut off or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that comes out looking kind of what like your video looked like.
Yeah,
right.
Looks good.
That's looking like pure slurry. But then I got this one. I had a little bit of extra beer left.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it. You see that bottom there?
Oh, sure.
So that's quite a bit of true, eh?
Yeah, but I mean, that's got to be 5%, you know, or something. And so the rule of thumb calculation is so conservative anyway. I wouldn't worry about it. Now, if it was half, sure, but at that rate, I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Awesome, thanks, man.
I would, and also when you're decanting, try to not pour all of that in, but it's not a big deal if it goes in too.
Well, I just pitched it yesterday. I pitched 2 of those, which ended up being like after the date, you know, on Brewfather and all that, kind of like you were saying, where you calculate the viability.
Mm-hmm.
I pitched 2 of this one, which ended up being like just shy of 300 billion into a Kolsch, and it was ripping like 6 hours later. So it definitely works.
Yeah, as long as you can be clean and sanitary, which one would hope we all can be. It's really a no-brainer. It's so easy. We're sponsored by Imperial Yeast, so they'll ship me yeast to my house anytime I want. I still save and reuse yeast. It's like, why hassle them to ship me yeast? Especially since we're getting maybe better performance in subsequent generations anyway.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
You bet. Charles, I see you came off mute, but we don't hear you if you are speaking. And if anyone's having trouble with their audio, feel free to put the question in the chat too.
How about now?
Yes, gotcha.
Okay, yeah. Teams will mess with your audio and video settings sometimes. So you go up to the mic, pull down, and fix it. You mentioned Imperial will ship to your house.
Mm-hmm.
That's intriguing. I mean, I as a home brewer can simply go online, go to their site, and do they have an online portal of sorts to be able to order directly from them? Because my whole issue is this: I moved from Colorado last year, and the kids and grandkids kidnapped us. So, but it's good because I'm getting ready to retire, and I'll have lots more time to do things like harvest my own yeast. But the dearth of fresh yeast, and in particular the dearth of local homebrew shops is just astounding out here. I'm in Carson City, and it's a desert, all right.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, it's more than just a geological desert. Beer and supplies and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying ordering from White Labs. They have a Yeastman store that I've ordered once before, and they seem to pack their yeast pretty well in with ice packs, so forth. More beer I've had less success with. In fact, I had some pretty warm yeast come by away after ordering them time. And they all say, don't order during the summer. Well, some of us want to use liquid yeast in the summer. So, given that, you can answer the smaller question. Will Imperial ship to me? And maybe you can riff on strategies for purchasing or obtaining yeast in less less available locales like I'm in.
Sure.
Any tips will help.
Yep. So first off, yes and no. So they're shipping to Brülosophy contributors as part of a sponsorship deal. And so you cannot go on the website and just click a button and have them shipped to your house. However, if you ask nicely in their email system, it is possible. So I know, granted, I live in the same town that Imperial is in, but I know that local homebrewers have reached out to them before, and they've shipped them special orders to their house. It's just you have to do the contact us question, and maybe they'll take care of you. I don't know if mentioning that you've seen them on Brülosophy will grant you any favors, but you could certainly try reaching out. And I know there is some precedent of that. And assuming they'd be willing to accommodate you, they have these boxes that are these cubes that are really well insulated, and it can fit 8 packs, no problem. And they pack it really well with ice. And me, coming from across town, it's always the ice is still cold when it gets here. But I've never lived in a homebrewing desert before, so I've never, let alone a desert state. So I've never had to deal with warm yeast shipping issues in the summer, or really even shipping yeast, because we have multiple homebrew stores here in town in Portland, Oregon. So I would say give them a shot, give them an email, let them know your situation and that you'd love to use their yeast, but you're not able to access it locally, or even online, you've had less than satisfactory experiences with third-party vendors. And maybe they'd be willing to ship it to you. I wouldn't be surprised if they would. I think that if you do that, it would be good to try to buy more than just a couple packs, and you can kind of, hold on to them. But assuming that doesn't work out for you, my strategy would be to probably buy a few packs of whatever it is that you're looking at. And should they be showing up warm, maybe, get 2 packs or 3 or something of a given strain, put them all in a starter and put them on a stir plate. And then after 24 hours, assuming it takes off, which I imagine a couple packs would, refrigerate that for a few days, decant the liquid off, and then pour the pure slurry into a glass jar with a milliliter markers on it. And you can use a calculator to figure out how much yeast you think went in and how much came out. At the very least, if the numbers are similar, based on the video that Jesse was just mentioning, I can put that in the chat if you're not familiar with it. Basically, the rule of thumb is for every 100 milliliters of pure slurry in your jar, you can estimate that to be 200 billion cells. A yeast starter calculator should reasonably accurately predict that. And so you'd be able to see where you're getting the cell growth that you expected. And if it's less, you can use the rule of thumb volume measurement to understand how much you actually have. And maybe you would have less due to viability loss from hot shipping. But then once you've built up this culture, use that for 5 generations, and maybe get multiple packs in a given order, and you can kind of just start building out your own yeast library. So I would really leverage starters and harvesting, because I would think that things are going to survive to a certain extent by the time they make it to your door, but it might be safest to go ahead and do starters and do some rough cell counting to make sure that things are in reasonable shape before fermenting.
Sure. I'm planning next year get a microscope and hemocytometer, but you can use pack cell volume to get a cheap centrifuge. That's a
Yeah.
good way to check that. Yeah, I recommend everybody watch your video. Saw that. It's great.
Thanks.
So could I ask one more?
You may. Yeah.
Would you define a generation? Let's say I have a pack, right? And I make a starter from it. And I save some of the yeast off from that, put it in a media bottle with some wort, and then stick it in my fridge. Is that a second generation, or when does a generation happen? Does the term generation only refer to yeast that has been fermented, harvested, and set aside, or can you create multiple generations by repeating the creation of a starter that you keep in your fridge? I'm just a little unclear on the term generation when we speak of that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. What I've heard is that every fermentation counts as a generation. So, for example, if you had a fresh pack, it's Gen 0, I guess, and then if you were to make a starter with it, that would be Gen 1, and then if you fermented a beer with it, it'd be Gen 2. So you'd be pitching second, or well, yeah. And then do you count when does it transition from the next one to the next one? But
yeah.
So some people count starters. I would say that at the homebrew level, when you're not fermenting a million batches, a year, a fermentation, a proper beer, 5-gallon or whatever fermentation is probably what I would count as a generation. I don't really count starters personally. I have a vague rule of thumb that I don't tend to ferment past 5th generation of a given strain that I'm working with. Funky beers and like rustic, Belgian beers might be an exception to that, but clean yeast strains, I don't go farther than that. So just because you don't want it to go off the rails. So I would say if that's the type of mental calculation you're making and you need a starter to kind of wake things back up, me personally, I wouldn't count that as a generation, even though a yeast scientist might disagree.
Well, thanks, Jordan, and really appreciate all the info you put out there for us.
You bet.
And since we are talking about starters and yeast, I do have a question about when I in Brewfather, when I'm using Brewfather as my tool, when I'm told that I need to step up a starter, am I supposed to decant the starter before I go to the next step? So like if it says that I should start out with a 1 liter and then grow it up to 2 liter, should I decant it between the steps?
Yes, if you're truly stepping starters and multi-phases like that, you should be decanting. The yeast and there's going to be a fair amount still in suspension. So if you want to, ideally, you should really refrigerate that for a couple days to try to drop that clear, because otherwise you're just going to be self-selecting the most flocculent yeast, and that's not the most representative sample of a given strain that you're working with. There are probably some strains, like maybe Nottingham or something, they're going to flock super hard and decanting isn't as important, but or crashing before decanting, as it were. But I would say best practice would be to cool it down before decanting, and if stepping starters, definitely want to decant. I don't know, maybe if volume wasn't an issue and your vessels got infinitely bigger, maybe it wouldn't be as big of a deal. But I don't think that there's any benefit to keeping that. There could be some detriment. And so, yeah, always decant. I will say this, though, I was told by Nick Impellitteri of the Yeast Bay years back when I was working with him on some mixed fermentation stuff, that as long as your starter volume is 10% or less of your total batch size, you can just pitch the whole starter. So these days, unless I'm making some sort of massive starter due to like a really old pack or something, on brew day, I'll just pitch the entire active culture, extra wort and all, as long as it's, about 10% or less of the whole batch.
Yeah, I'm in Sweden, so we don't really getting fresh yeast is somewhat of an issue. So I always have to make a starter. But that means that when I'm stepping up from a 1 liter to a 2 liter starter, I would still really, what I'm asking is it the amount of fermentable sugar that is the most important things when I'm stepping it up? If I do I really need 2 more liters of 1040 wort to get to the next stage, if the next stage is a 2 liter starter?
As opposed to what?
Well, could I? So if I would it be sufficient to rather make the entire starter 2 liters of 1040? Can I make it? Can I make a stronger wort, a stronger starter wort, and just add that to the total amount of liquid?
I see. So there is a relationship between starter strength and yeast growth, or at least modeled yeast growth. And that's really the last thing I've yet to conquer in Brewfather is the yeast starter application within it. I'm using all the other features. Do you know? I'm pulling it up now on my phone. Does the yeast starter tool allow you to specify the gravity of their starter? It looks like it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks very similar actually to Brewer's Friend. So this should be pretty easy for me to transition to. So when you change the SG in the pitch rate calculator in Brewfather, you'll see that the predicted yield in terms of billions of cells will change. The rule that they taught us in the yeast book by Jim, who was that? Chris White and Jamil Zainasheff, I believe, was that starters should be in the 1030 to 1040 range. I don't know that it's optimal for yeast health for it to be too much stronger, but you certainly could. I believe that the stronger the starter, the more yeast growth that you would experience. So if you think about it the other direction, if your starter is too weak, 1025, 1020, you're not going to get as much replication. But I would say that you might as well, for your first step, go as big as you can, because if you have the volume in your vessel, you're going to generate more yeast as a function of more sugars present, in this case, volume, not strength. And at a certain point, if you have a starter big enough, you wouldn't need that second step. But you're going to start to get limited by either efficiencies of cost or vessel size.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where are you getting liquid yeast?
So I actually for the first time now, after 4 years of homebrewing, I've gotten some imperial yeast. So I have a few packs now that I'm gonna grow them up and store them and eventually use them, of course. But I do get. I can get some white labs. White labs have one of the labs in Copenhagen, which is not that far away. So but finally I've gotten a hold of some imperial.
What'd you get?
I got first of all, the main thing is because of you guys, I've gotten the triple double. Because I'm really into the Belgian styles, and of course I've gotten a harvest, and I got some Kolsch yeast, the Dieter strain. Yes. Yeah.
Fun. And what website did you get those off of?
Actually, there is one place in Denmark that actually is a reseller for the imperial yeast.
You got it in
strains.
person?
Yes,
Wow.
I got it in person. So yeah, so I could keep them cool, at least from the store and home.
Are there liquid yeast brands for the Europe homebrewing market?
Not really. The most normal one is the White Labs ones.
Which maybe are grown in Copenhagen.
Probably. I assume they are. Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, Triple Double's a great one. Dieter's good too. I'm the maybe the harvest holdout amongst the contributors. A lot of people love it. It's not for me. I'll be interested to hear what you think. It's got this. I want to say an ester, but I don't know if that's accurate. That I don't love. I don't hate it. It's just it's more characterful than 3470.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying it out.
What do you want to make with it?
I'm really I'm in favor of Vienna lagers. That is really one of my favorites. I like them a little bit more characterful. But of course, Helles would be good. Maybe a bock of some kind. But the first one would probably be a Vienna lager.
I'm curious, how do you go about a Vienna lager grist? What do you think should go in that?
I think there should be, strangely enough, a lot of Vienna malt. And I do like adding a bit of Munich and a little bit of pale chocolate. That's the normal grist, like 85% Vienna, 12% Munich, and 3% pale chocolate. That's my normal grist.
Yeah, I want to. Oh, you got a. What is that, Jesse?
That's a Vienna lager right there. It's probably looking a little dark with the light, but it's yeah, it looks black on the camera. But
it looks black.
It does.
Yeah,
it looks black. Yeah.
What's the grist there?
And quite clear. Yeah, I'm just looking that up. What I do? About 60% Vienna, 25 Pilsner. There's a touch of Munich in there, a touch of Crystal, and a touch of pale chocolate for color.
Yeah, you see a lot of pale chocolate in Vienna recipes, and that's another thing that I would never do that. I don't want any rose character in my Vienna. The Andreas Kinnemar historical Vienna recipe is just 100% Vienna, and I'm gonna make 100% Vienna beer soon. And I have a couple different malts to play around with. I've got some Czech Vienna, and also the Weyermann Vienna, and it'll be really interesting to see how dark or lack thereof it is. 100% Weyermann Vienna might just look pretty much pale.
Yeah,
it'll be like
So I would historically for my Viennas, I'd maybe do like 1%, 0.5% of Carafa 3 at mash out to get a little bit more color there. Because I just don't want any roast character in my Vienna. So I'm curious, Jesse, if you're getting any roast in the background at all from your use of the chocolate malt.
I can taste the crystal or whatever a little bit, but not on the roast. Like what I always do when I use roasted malts for color is put them in at like the last 4 minutes of the mash.
Yep. That's basically what I'm doing. Yeah. Are you sparging?
Yeah, but I'm on a Bruzilla, so it's like a pretty quick sparge. I'm not doing a complicated fly sparge or anything like that.
Does anyone else on the call have hot takes on how to make good Vienna lager? or any other questions or topics you guys want to shift to?
I did have one another question. I've been brewing in 6.5 gallon kegs now for about probably a little over a year, and I'm loving it. Like, as
Yeah.
far as the keeping the oxygen out and just like how all the transfers work, and they're easy to clean. I clean them right on my bucket blaster. Like,
Yep.
everything's great. But I was curious because I know you're like a pretty heady IPA guy. Like, how are you dry hopping? And like, what sort of, would love to hear anything about that. Like, what,
Sure.
how you're getting in there, and also like your ideas on timing and temp and stuff.
Sure. So also fermenting in kegs. And for IPAs, I'm dry hopping pretty heavy, uh, ounce and a half or 2 ounces per gallon. So, there's a lot of loss. So if you can get a 6.5 gallon keg fairly full for your fermentation, you're going to be a lot closer to a full 5 gallons of finished beer. So that's one trick. But I'm also whirlpooling at about an ounce a gallon in the kettle. So I'm losing a lot to the kettle too. So I typically do no sparge brewing, but if I want to actually net a full 5 gallon keg, I need to sparge because there's so much loss along the way because I'm using the claw hammer 10 gallon system, and for a lager it's like perfect for no sparge to end with a pretty full 5 gallon keg. But for IPA, if you don't sparge, you're going to have like 4 gallons or something cold before you start taking samples. So I'm fermenting in a keg with a floating dip tube, and I'm using the floating dip tubes with filters from More Beer. I used to have, and I still have some kegs that have the original floating dip tubes, the clear beer draft system. And I found that those can be hit or miss when it comes to dry hop clogging. So I have successfully dry hopped on those recently, actually, but I found that the More Beer ones, I never have a clog. So my process is I ferment in a keg with a floating dip tube with a filter, and following fermentation, I'm get my dry hops ready, and I'm trying to fill the keg almost as full as possible to minimize the amount of headspace that's going to be exposed. And so at the end of fermentation, I open the keg lid, pour it in, close it, and then purge it 5 times. And then we'll seal the keg under CO2 pressure and let it sit at whatever fermentation temp it's at this point. So 62 degrees Fahrenheit maybe, because I'm pretty much exclusively fermenting my IPAs with 3470 at around 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'll let it sit there under pressure, 5 psi, 10 psi, something like that, for 24 hours. And then I'll attach the gas, 5, 10 psi, crash cool it overnight, and then pressure transfer out of the fermentation keg into a Sani purged serving keg, and I'm not getting clogged transfers. I don't know if the cold crash is necessary, but once I started incorporating that, and after transitioning to the More Beer floating dip tubes, wasn't having problems with clogs. I'll also note that I started, up until 6 months ago, a year ago, I was transferring to a dry hopping keg. So I'd have yet another floating dip tube keg ready, and I'd get it off the yeast, and that way I could save the yeast and save that for repitches. But I didn't I found that cleaning a second keg or yet another keg was the greater of two evils relative to losing the yeast, because I'm also doing lager fermentations, and I can just save the yeast. Since I'm using 3470 for kind of everything almost, I'll just save the yeast for my lager fermentations and just throw away the IPA yeast, since it's now been contaminated with dry hops.
Are you using firm cap?
No, I am using firm cap in the boil, but not in cold side. So if I'm blowing off via the gas post during fermentation, and occasionally some will get through the tube, but just given that I'm not fermenting like Hefeweizens or typically with something with like a tons of Krausen production, most of my fermentations don't really get yeast through the blow off.
Why is there a reason you're not using firm cap, or you just don't like it, or?
Don't need it.
Because I've had I use it now because I try to fill them pretty full. I try to get 5.5 in there. It's 5.5 gallon, a bit more if I can, and 6.5 gallon. And especially some yeast, like it's a mess if I don't use that stuff. But cool, it's working for you.
What do you typically ferment your IPAs with?
Either California Ale or USO5.
And I would imagine you're going to get more Krausen from those than I'm getting with a, cool, warm lager ferment, given that they're allegedly bottom fermenters.
And you said I guess if you're fermenting at 60F, that's like, is that like 15 or 16 degrees Celsius? That's colder, yeah.
That would so not getting help. A ton of Krausen production. But I'm curious, so my dry hop method, did that make sense? And how different is that from what you do?
Well, like, what do you put it in? Do you put it in one of those stainless steel mesh colanders, or are you using bags?
Oh, yeah, I dry hop loose. So
you do? Okay.
I'm only using pellets in this method. I haven't dry hopped with whole leaf in a while. And I like to include a flowable addition with my dry hops as well. But that obviously doesn't have the same concerns around filtering it out or anything. So open the keg lid, probably have the jar filled with my 8 ounces or so of dry hops, pour it in, immediately seal it. And that's why maybe the crash cooling is helping ensure that I'm able to get it all out. Now, I'm losing a ton to loss. And I'm sure I could get more out if I was bagging it, because there's a gallon or so caught up in the dry hops at the bottom of the keg after the filter. And that's just loss that I accept at the, it seems to be you're going to get more aroma and character if they're not bound in a tight fitting vessel. It'd be cool if there was a way that it could kind of float freely and there was like a false bottom or something below that the drawing of the liquid was below that line. But since that doesn't exist, those hop tubes, you would need to probably, if you used a couple of them, maybe it'd be okay, because they expand so much at the dry hopping levels I'm using. I don't have a tube big enough to actually get the free flow of the hop that I want.
Yeah, you have like a fifth of that after the hops arrive. It's a fifth of that keg is just solid hop, like wild. What I do is I do it in a loose bag, and I don't use floating dip tubes. I just use my kegs with an inch cut off on the bottom, and it was pretty good. But I basically been brewing pretty boring beers, and I want to start getting into doing a little bit more of the high hopping IPAs and kind of just screwing around a bit for fun, right? So that's kind of why I'm asking.
Well, I would say that if you're going to dry hop, I would say do this in no matter what, but especially if you're dry hopping in a bag, try Spectrum or Incognito, and your dry hop. Definitely do it in addition to your T90, and I would encourage incorporating Lupomax into some of that as well. But I think, and we've tested this, I believe it was significant that we had a significant difference between beers that were dry hopped free versus bagged. And it's hard to get the same level of intensity. So also, if you're using a bag, use the biggest one you can find.
And then, so when you put it into the second keg, I mean, you said it had like an overnight cold crash, basically.
So I'm now dry hopping in primary. Previously, I was dry hopping in a second keg. But either way, after 24 hours at room temp on dry hops, cold crash overnight, 12-hour, 24-hour, then I'm close transferring to the serving keg.
Are you gelatin finding at that point or no?
Sometimes I'll gelatin find that day. Sometimes I'll do it like a few days later. But what I'm not doing, I'm not adding the gelatin solution to the bottom of the keg and then filling it with beer. I've done that like once before. I'm sure it works, but I've always been kind of afraid that the pouring it in the hot stuff into the cool keg could kind of like cause some gelatinization. So I always add gelatin on top of beer as opposed to beer on top of gelatin.
Same. Are you getting like, so I imagine you're getting pretty hazy beers doing it like that. Like, are you able to do like a fairly clear West Coast IPA with that process, or do you find you need to crash it longer?
Yeah, so I use gelatin, and I'm considering transitioning to biofine because my friends that are using that are making really clear beers. Gelatin tends to work. So before the gelatin, yes, it's quite hazy. But after the gelatin addition, it 9 times out of 10 it gets pretty clear. Occasionally, it's just like the beer doesn't care and won't clear.
Is that in your serving keg then, the gelatin?
It is. And yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Do you ever get it? Do you ever find it's kind of getting stuck up in in like some of your poppets and the quick disconnects and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I add my gelatin through the gas in post. And I've probably talked about this on the podcasts before, but so what I'm doing is filling a like plastic water bottle with a hot gelatin solution, carb cap, CO2 purge, turn upside down, and then into the gas in post, and then purge it, of course. And so my gas in posts get gunky with the gelatin in there. But since most of my kegs have floating dip tubes, I'm not getting a ton of gelatin in the beer lines, I don't think. But when I clean the keg, there is gelatin stuck to the keg. And so sometimes it requires scrubbing, definitely a good PBW soak. And so there's definitely some cleaning to do there. But all that is to say, my gunky poppets are actually on the gas inside. And so one thing that I use is More Beer sells a what do they call it? It's a like gas in post flow. It's like a flow stopper. And so it's this thing that goes on your gas in post, and it's got a little ball in it. And then if you were to overflow, it lets air out when you're doing closed transfer. And if it was to exceed the amount of liquid that the keg can hold, it would go up into the overflow valve and the ball stops it. And so that by overfilling these kegs basically with my PBW solution, I'm actually able to then clean the gas in post that way a little bit by letting the PBW overflow through the flow control valve, thereby kind of cleaning in place the gas in posts.
Cool. One last question about that. Are you using floating dip tubes on your serving kegs too?
Almost. I have a few kegs that are not retrofitted still. But yeah, tend to use floating dip tubes in serving kegs as well.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah. And Charles in the chat here mentioned this Brew Lab episode where Dr. Mutsoglu did this, like, I think it was high nitrogen, low gravity starter method. Really fascinating stuff. And Cade did an experiment on that, and I recall that the finishing gravities were really different, which was interesting. I haven't messed around with that, but I've been very interested in it. Definitely super interesting approach. Our ability to measure nitrogen on the homebrew scale, I think, was a little challenging, but definitely some interesting things to look at.
I'm saving up for my HPLC. But yeah, I mean, it's my understanding though, between 30 and 40, 1030 and 1040 is the recommended spot, because there's osmotic problems with high sugar, and yeasts apparently don't seem to like more than 40. My starter's all at 135.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, when I'm making a starter, as long as it's between 1030 and 1040 plus or minus a couple points, I'm happy. 1035 is pretty good sweet spot, I think, to target.
Speaking of dirty poppets and those kinds of things, I'm relatively new to this by a couple of years, but how often do I need to disassemble, say, my quick disconnects? Accelerator has a great video for how to take it out and not lose the little stainless steel balls and all that, but is this something that a PBW soak or a run through using a pump with PBW takes care of for these connectors? Or is it really something that you need to, fully disassemble them, give them a good scrub with a small, pipe planer type of size thing? Or, what do you guys do? I mean, do you clean every time, every 10th time, every N times? What's the...
And you're asking about the poppets, the keg post specifically?
Yeah, well, poppets, quick connects. I'm talking about the not the cam lock ones, the true disconnect connectors, and for valves for that matter. I mean, when I started rigging my kettles, I made sure I got the ones that unbolt, the ball valves that unbolt, so I could disassemble them completely and get in there and clean them real well. But depending on where you go online, you say, just run PBW through it with a pump and you'll be fine, and maybe clean them out every 6 months. That always seems to be, to me, a little dangerous, less than optimal for cleaning. Just kind of curious what your experiences are.
Yeah, so I probably, now that you mention it, probably would benefit from disassembling my kegs and giving my poppets a good scrub down. I don't disassemble my kegs regularly and actually clean the poppets. I just fill them with, rinse them out and maybe scrub them out after use with just a sponge and water. Fill them with PBW, but I'll push since I'm fermenting in kegs and serving in kegs, everything's a keg, and so I'm using CO2 to push things around, and so that's effectively cleaning the line. It's like I mentioned earlier, it's overflowing out the gas poppet, so it's cleaning that. I think best practice though would be to disassemble them. I don't think that you need to do it every single time. The fact that I'm never doing it and I'm not having contaminated fermentations or serving kegs, you can clearly get away with it. But it was I'm sure there's gunk in there if I was to start, digging into it. I don't have ball valves that I can disassemble on the claw hammer on the hot side. When I was working with a propane system, I would disassemble my ball valves and unscrew them and take them all apart and soak them and scrub them off, and they would get gunky. But the claw hammers are not disassemblable, so everything's CIP, and I'm not breaking that down either.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? If you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. Choose from hundreds of social casino style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
We all know that designing recipes is really fun, and doing it well is so much easier with good software. We at Brülosophy recently made the switch to Brewfather, and honestly, y'all, we could not be happier. Brewfather utilizes the latest technology to bring you the most robust cloud-based recipe design software that can be accessed anywhere, on your phone, tablet, desktop, and even offline. It also works seamlessly with numerous third-party devices to make it easier to monitor every step of your brew. I know change can be difficult, but trust me when I say you need to go to brewfather.app today to try it out for yourself. That's brewfather.app.
There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today.
Paul mentions that he has real problems with floating dip tubes in the tube, and that the tube sometimes sits above the beer. Yeah, that can be a thing. There's 3 or 4 different brands out there of floating dip tubes, so certain ones are going to probably be more prone to that than others. The clear beer draft system, I don't actually love it. It's too complicated of a solution, but it's really good at not sitting above the beer. So it definitely works in that regard. But it's a bunch of parts and it's not as clean, I think, as the more beer solution, which can have that problem. All of my more beer ones have the optional filter attachment. And the optional filter attachment has 3 different settings. You can placement settings for where the floats in the beer. And so messing around with that, I can't remember off the top of my head if it's the top rung or the bottom rung, but one of those does a lot better. So dialing that in with the where you attach it is one way. But the other thing is sometimes it just gets kind of mangled up. Shake the keg and hopefully you can drop it back down.
And to add on that, that little filter thing, add a small stainless steel nut in it, and it will drop down a little bit. That's what I do, or one of these for the stirrer for my starters, is magnetic pins, just something that can weight it down so that it drops down below the beer line.
Yeah, I've heard of that method. I'm doing okay with whichever direction whichever one it's attached to. So that's certainly something you can do as well. But it is possible to do it correctly without a weight. But that's maybe a good bit of insurance there. Any other new questions or new topics?
I had a question maybe about a beer that I'm working on right now, and I'm using a claw hammer keg fermenter with it. Mm-hmm. So I decided to ferment under pressure for the first time on it. It's not a lager yeast strain. It's an ale yeast strain. It's Irish. It's WLP004, I think. But the reason I decided to do it is I didn't have a cooling solution, a chilling solution in my house. My house sits at about a 70 degree. So it's fine until the yeast starts working. And then it shot up to 76 or whatever. So I thought I could compensate with low pressure. I just did 5%. As far as I can tell, it did not like that little bit of pressure. But it kind of has a gross taste, kind of a savory taste, probably autolysis, probably breakdown of the yeast cells, glutamates, that kind of thing. But as far as I have heard, that kind of Mercaptan-y flavor doesn't really leave beer. I decided to give it a few weeks just to see. I mean, I don't like throwing away beer. So it's sitting and it's fermenting. Do you have any experience with that particular flavor compound or byproduct? Or if I were to explain it, it's kind of it's hammy. It smells like an Irish morning breakfast. You know what I mean? It's got that cabbagey, hammy. You know what I'm talking about? It's weird.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can't help but think that it's something related to the yeast or the fermentation. I wouldn't expect autolysis to be a function of a little bit of pressure and heat or fermentation temperature.
I don't know. I couldn't figure out why this yeast strain in particular was that little bit of pressure. Like it didn't seem like an amazingly large amount or anything. So I don't know what else the flavor could be. I have scanned through so many different lexicons and stuff for flavors and flavor compounds to try to figure out, okay, what am I identifying here and why don't I like it and what is it? You know what I mean? Unless you have another idea. From what I understand from watching Brülosophy, you are a student of craft beer, or were, at one point, maybe an older video. So I figured maybe you would be a good person to ask, what am I looking for and how do I identify whether this is something that is going to go away other than just waiting it out. In your schooling, did they do a lot of that kind of, hey, this is kind of the chemical that will produce and this is the result, of this kind of fermentation issue. This is, whether or not you can do anything about it.
Yeah, I could, make some guesses, but I don't know for sure what's going on. But I think that you're right that it's what it is. I don't know, but it sounds like it doesn't taste good, and I do not think that's going to go away. And it seems to be related to the fermentation, whether it was the quality of the yeast you already had,
sure,
or the high fermentation or the pressure, or all three. I think that open fermentation was somewhat traditional,
sure,
over there. So I'm not surprised that this strain doesn't like pressure. My advice would be brew Belgians or use Kvik yeast, maybe or maybe honestly 3470
sure,
can handle something those low 70s. But there's nothing wrong with a wet t-shirt and a box fan. There's some simple solutions you can kind of use to tamp down the temperature in a low cost, low tech way.
Well, since then I've been building like a homemade glycol unit, so it's fine.
Oh, okay.
I'll figure it out. I just won't brew under pressure again. But and I think the first batch I did use German lager yeast. So I did lager this like back in February, the first time I made it. Definitely did not come with that flavor. So, yeah, I just thought I'd ask, get your 2 cents on it.
Well, I'll say I don't see that flavor going away, unfortunately. But
Maybe
give it a couple months, maybe they'll mellow out a little.
Find a bunch of people throwing a party and see if they want free beer. That's what I'm hearing. It tastes like meat, but it'll get you drunk here.
Yep, you'd be amazed what people will drink. Yeah, whenever occasionally I'll have a batch that doesn't come out great, and I hate dumping it, but I also hate giving it away. It's like a double-edged sword because I don't want people to think that this is like, the quality of beer that I can make. But when it's tolerable to people that don't care, it feels like a waste to dump, 5 gallons down the drain.
But Bruce, you said that it tastes like ham.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Very savory. Well, the flavor actually isn't bad, but the aroma is, kind of a meaty flavor.
Jordan, don't you think that is some sort of sulfur compound?
I guess it could be, but you wouldn't expect a ton of sulfur production from a warm Irish ale ferment. But by fermenting it under pressure, you are capturing way more volatiles that would be produced, that'd be blown off otherwise. So I guess it's possible. Sounds like autolysis from the textbook, but that's a tough one to recreate on the homebrew level.
Mm-hmm. That's what the conclusion I kind of came up with too. But I just started school for this stuff too, and I'm pretty humble about it. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm pretty new to everything. So I just wanted a second opinion,
Yeah, yeast. I would think that autolysis would probably be more likely to come from unfortunate yeast health, as opposed to, you have a bunch of half dead cells in there, ruptured cells in there, something like that, as opposed to a hotter under pressure fermentation. But it's just a guess.
I was trying to think what other things would do it. I made a starter with it. There were complications with the starter. We didn't brew it when we were supposed to, so I had to put it in the fridge and then wake it back up later. And, there are other things that could have contributed to it. Maybe it's compounded, but yeah, that is a good point. Maybe it's not pressure. I almost want to recreate it, but I don't want to pay $50 to do it. You know what I mean?
Jordan, how damaging can a magnet on a stir plate be to cell walls? I mean, it's spinning pretty hard in there sometimes. Is that a factor in degrading integrity of the cell walls?
Yeah, I've heard concerns of that actually, and I think that's why the shakers that they have in breweries and laboratories are a more preferred method due to like the potential for like shearing the cells or something like that.
Right.
But I think that at the homebrew level, I mean, if you have a shaker, sure, use it, but I'm not too concerned about it.
I'd assume that if you're not turning that stir plate all the way up, and really causing like a huge whirlpool in your flask, it's probably not super violent, right? I don't stir it really crazy anyway. I just kind of let it circulate. So I would hope that would reduce the chances of that. But I could probably source a shaker if I really wanted to. I just don't know. I mean, I've spent so much on upgrades recently. It's not in my treat budget. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
He just did an article about all of that debunked a whole bunch of stuff. I just read it last week, and it was an incredible read. Well, maybe if I could find it, I'll post it for you guys. It's
that would be awesome.
a lot about that, like how if it's possible for that stir plate to shear it. I think a couple things I remember was you do want that vortex to go all the way down to the stir, the stir bar. Because if you don't, then you're not getting that proper oxidation. And the other thing that I found really interesting was if you're using dry yeast, then that's a huge factor. If you do a starter from dry yeast without rehydrating it first, those cell walls are dried out and depleted, and they acids kicked in that starter if you got a stir plate going. But I think liquid, based on this article, was kind of like the amount of pressure required for that inflated yeast cell to be damaged by that is just impossible.
I'd love to check that out. And that's a good point. I mean, it was a slurry because it's White Labs, and that's what they do is the perfect pitch pouches. But like, I am going to start working with dry yeast soon. And I wasn't even thinking about rehydration. So that is I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, just don't turn the plate on until it's good and rehydrated is all I do now. It's just kind of give it some time to rehydrate and suck up that water and kind of create the elasticity in that cell wall before you start beating the crap out of it, right? That's what I took from that article.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's one of the reasons that they recommend don't do starters on dry yeast, just pitch enough. Sure. Dry yeast is different, like Lalamond, I think, is the one brand that even said that like the liquid yeast pitch rates are not equivalent for dry yeast on the first generation. And so, because I was doing the math, and it seems that they're actually recommending lower pitch rates. Maybe it's a marketing scam because they don't want to scare people away by thinking they need to buy too much. But they claim that the math is different, and so that's a really interesting point related to starters that like you wouldn't want to whip it around prior to them waking up and rehydrating.
Yeah, more like rehydrating. Yeah, like inflating again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesting experiment to kind of compare the behavior and the performance of dry yeast, through a starter and an equivalent amount of cells through just a dry pitch. Kind of just to see how the two beers compare.
I'm sure that Brülosophy has tested hydrated versus not 10 years ago before I was involved when dry yeast was more popular. Looking now.
I use a lot of dry yeast just because I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I'm literally surrounded in corn. So getting solid liquid yeast is tough. Even though escarpment's only 2 hours away from me, it's still really hard to get it out here. in a day or two. So I've been playing around a lot with the one thing I'll say, like anecdotally, is like don't add oxygen on first gen. Like if I'm pitching out of the pack, I've found it better if you don't oxygenate.
Really, like
But
when
dry yeast, Jesse?
Yeah.
Yeah, they say not to oxygenate.
huh. And does that mean both agitation and force oxidation through a cardstone, or you don't want to do either, or
I just don't oxygenate. So like sure agitate, why not? But I mean, like I definitely don't add pure oxygen. I've because I've done it before on a similar recipe and not done it and found that the one that I didn't oxygenate coming straight from the dry pack actually tasted better. But who knows, man? That could have been another factor. Like I have no idea.
But
Going
yeah,
on gut on that.
don't they say that if you're gonna repitch it, if you're gonna reuse it, you should oxygenate it before.
Yeah. So basically,
But
what I do,
but if you're not, then you're fine with not oxygenating
Yeah.
it.
I basically make like a lager or a basic pale ale, like 5% or less on a dry pitch, and then do Jordan's program of saving the yeast after that, and then oxygenating after that. You oxygenate, obviously, Jordan.
Yeah, I oxygenate every time because I'm using liquid yeast. If I definitely have direct pitched, no rehydration, dry yeast, and not oxygenated. There is lag that maybe that's more associated with just the dry yeast waking up, though, not the lack of oxygen. That would be an interesting experiment as well. Actually, would be sprinkling dry yeast directly into two batches and pure oxygen in one and no oxygen in the other to see if there is a difference either way.
Yeah, I might do that. That's a good idea.
Allegedly it doesn't need it, so it's just one less thing to clean that day. Unclear how important it is, but we've tested oxygen with liquid yeast too, and they say that the first generation of liquid yeast, it's really not as important at the homebrew level either. I think I'm the only contributor that uses pure oxygen.
But then comes the question: do you need to oxygenate your starter?
They say you should. I've heard blast like pure oxygen for 20 seconds or something in your starter. I don't make a ton of starters these days because I'm typically just pitching enough fresh packs and then harvesting and pitching based on volume sufficiently without the need for the starter. I have blasted some pure oxygen in a starter before, but I typically don't, just because it's one more thing to clean, and I'm hoping that I'm getting enough from the stir plate. But I guess that's an interesting point. If you didn't have a stir plate, maybe it would be more beneficial to add some oxygen if you're just doing a stagnant still starter.
Or maybe some olive oil.
Maybe.
According to the brew lab.
How's Cade doing? Do you still talk to him?
Yeah, he's doing well. He actually just published a paper on pick times for Citra, and the summary of the study was that the middle picking window is your best bet. And I think it was like early pick had more onion garlic, and late pick had some other undesirable character. And then he's got another article, I think, on smoke taint that's coming out later this year. And these are in, academic journals. And I don't think this is publicly announced yet, but I think he gets to go to New Zealand Hop Harvest next year. Very jealous of that.
Yeah, I really miss the brew lab, man, especially the applying the science when it was just you two guys. Like I got a lot out of those. I still listen to them. I got a bunch of them on a kind of my boring workday playlist. And yeah, I miss it, man.
Yeah, he just had a second kid, and he's in this PhD program, and he hasn't brewed in a while either. And so first home brewing went away, and then he was still doing the podcast. and he just decided that it was just too crazy with kids and school and work and everything to try to run a podcast. If it was just me and him talking every week, it'd probably be a little different. But tracking down a research scientist to talk to every week, it was really tough. Because you may recall the first year or two of the podcast, he had a different guest every week. And so then I was on every 10th episode, I think. And then eventually it was like, dude, we got to do it every other episode because trying to find a new professional every week is just insane. And so I think that maybe it'd be a different story for him if he didn't have to deal with tracking someone down every other week.
Do you miss it? Like, have you ever thought about doing another podcast or?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It was great for me because he did all the work,
Yeah.
So like I wasn't involved with finding the scientists or interviewing them. And so all I had to do was listen to the episode and be prepared to, riff on the topic. And some of them were challenging to find something we could talk about. And so I helped think through a lot of the applying the science episodes, like what we would talk about and stuff. But, he did a lot of the legwork. And I don't think that I want to be responsible for running another podcast because I have a full-time job and other hobbies. And I also want to be able to brew beer, right? And so the more Brülosophy things I do, like, this, for example, cuts into like potential brew days. But if there was like Marshall or someone wanted to do another podcast and it was more like I just had to show up and like, chat about beer, I'd be down with that. One thought I've had was maybe like if we had kind of like a traditional podcast where we interviewed pro brewers or something like that and like talked about whatever innovative stuff that they were involved in, that'd be kind of fun to do. And I'd like that to be the interviewer and the podcast lead, but it's just so much work putting it together. I don't know that I have it in me. One of the reasons I'm not on the Brülosophy podcast that much is Marshall only records on the weekend mornings. He's a very regimented guy and schedules his entire life out, every day, every night. And so he has a large family and stuff. And so he's a good dad and has, family responsibilities. So he's carved out weekend mornings for podcasts. And so Cade, on the other hand, was really flexible, and any time that worked for the two of us, we could make it work. So that was nice. So that is part of it all, is like having a podcast that can be a little bit more fungible in the scheduling. Whereas Marshall being weekend mornings is just, I want to brew or I want to camp and go skiing or whatever. And so I don't get to do the main podcast as much because I'm often, out adventuring on the weekends.
That's valid.
We'll take what we get, Jordan. Don't worry.
Did you guys see the new YouTube episode this week?
Yeah, I just watched it today.
Charles, we talked, and Rune, we talked about Party Guile brewing.
Yeah.
And I went over a super big OG barley wine that I made. You guys ever messed around with anything like that? Really big beers?
Not really. No.
Nothing more than like 14 pounds of grain, but
Mhm.
that seemed like a real monster of an experiment.
Yeah. I'm just glad it turned out. It's actually pretty good. And no, I still have it. It only netted a 3-gallon keg, but I'm drinking an ounce every couple weeks or something because it's 18%.
Wow.
How long was that brewed?
Say again.
How long was that brewed at? You didn't say.
It was morning till nighttime. So 90-minute mash. What was it, a 3-hour boil, I think I said?
3 or 4.
Yeah, and then fair amount of time in between dealing with everything. So probably mashed in at like 10 or 11, and it was nighttime when I was pitching yeast. So the whole day.
Like 10, 11 hours, something like that.
Probably something like that, yeah. I did a decoction brew day the other day. That's like child's play compared to a big barley wine brew day.
Well, you can't short and shoddy a barley wine, right?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was like, because I'm always scheming of how do I turn a brew into an article. We have these formats, brew it yourself. It's kind of a catch-all, but we can't do unlimited of those, right? So, and it's got to be pretty innovative to make a brew it yourself article. Short and shoddy, the Hop Chronicles, or an experiment. And I don't really like doing the Hop Chronicles because the survey is really tough for tasters. It's a lot of questions, and it's really challenging for the taster. And and also the beers are kind of boring. So I don't like to do those that much. And so that kind of leaves me with how do I make this beer either an experiment or short and shoddy. And so that barley wine, I was thinking about how I could do either one. And I was like, I just can't make this beer with a 30-minute mash and a 30-minute boil. There's no way to make it that strong on my system. I would need some sort of like crazy quadruple oversized system to pull that off. So similarly, I was like, it's going to take every piece of equipment I own. I can't do two of these side by side. So I wasn't able to do an experiment for it either. So I'm glad I was able to I don't think this is it's not public yet. So the that brew day is going to be a BIY article that totally outlines the process and the ingredients and how people could brew a beer like that themselves. So that's in the hopper. Everything's submitted to our system. So that'll be coming out in the next few months, I think.
Cool. I'll be looking for that one. That's awesome.
Is there a place to get those surveys that you guys have?
What do you mean?
Well, like I
an
have
archive?
like somewhere I can download that survey that you guys use for those.
There are 3 surveys. The experiment surveys are custom. I mean, they're really all kind of custom built, but the experiment surveys are custom built for each experiment. But the big thing is just assigning of the samples to the cups or whatever, which Marshall does. And then the Hop Chronicles surveys are very generic. There's no change at all, I think, other than making a new one. And the short and shoddy one, the only difference in the survey is at the beginning it tells the taster the BJCP description. So that's the only thing that changed there. So the templates are not publicly available, but if you wanted one, I wouldn't be surprised that Marshall be willing to send you a template. He uses Google Docs or Google Forms, so they should be easily shareable.
I have 2 identical Bruzillas, and I've just been goofing around with doing my own little experiments, and I think it'd be neat to be able to go through that survey.
Yeah, well, are you in the brew club?
Yeah.
I don't know if we're still doing that anymore, but there were, in the past brew club experiments that got published to the website. So
it's a top tier pay thing you guys do. Yeah.
And the club does, or is it a Patreon thing?
I think it's a Patreon thing where you can like be a part of a experiment or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know the business side of that, but we haven't had one in a while though, so I don't know if there hasn't been as much interest or what. But we haven't had a contributor one. I think we had a few more happen during the pandemic.
The one I'm designing right now is like I just did a yeast comparison yesterday, so I brewed 2 identical batches of Kolsch and compared it to K97 and Nova Lager because honestly, I always like doing yeast comparisons, and I just have not been enjoying K97, so I'm trying to find something that'll kick a little fruit that's a better replacement for that. And then the next
people
one
complain about that strain.
Yeah, and then the next one I want to do is dry hop timing. So when I want to start doing a few of those because I'm just starting to get into more dry hopping, and it's fun.
Yeah, one thing that I've been wanting to experiment is whether there's a difference between dry hopping on the yeast cake or separating the yeast from the beer. So in my case, that'd be a transfer, and dry hopping in a, with no yeast cake present. That maybe, we got 12 minutes left on this chat here. That'd be, I guess, an interesting discussion question. Is there any experiment ideas that you guys have that you'd like to see us tackle?
Nothing that could be done easily. I think it would be really awesome to aggregate like a list of different yeast strain. That's something I haven't been able to find like an intuitive database of, is a list of yeast strains and whether or not they are pressure resistant or not. But that doesn't seem like something that you could accomplish an easy experiment with. That would be something to do over time. Kind of unrealistic to get any kind of quick turnaround on something like that.
Yeah, that would probably be more appropriate for White Labs or Omega to do.
Yeah.
But that is one, I meant to say this earlier, actually, when we were talking about pressure fermentation, is they say that not every strain is meant to be fermented under pressure, and the benefits that you get from that are strain dependent. So a list like that would be helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
What about some of the sour VCA and like Philly sour stuff? Like, have you guys been playing around with doing experiments with stuff like that? Especially you, like, you're a traditional sour brewer.
Yeah, I have never used either one. I know some guys in the club have, or the crew have. There might be an experiment out there on it. And, I've had some decent sour beers, either pro or homebrew, using that. But I've never given it a try. What do you think the experiment would be? Just Philly versus sour Sourbissier?
Yeah, maybe, or I don't know. I just feel like, that's definitely a new field. It's a new meadow to walk through. There's not a lot out there about it. I'm sure if you guys are smarter than me, I'm sure you could think about a way to play around with that in an experiment, or maybe just even a comparison with some of your wild blends. Like, I'm not sure.
Yeah. I know that there are different tricks that you can use to like get better expression of the sourness, and maybe some fermentation kinetics too. Like, and again, I've never messed around with those. And so from what I remember is like maybe pitch rate, maybe oxygenation, maybe fan or something was relevant there, maybe starting pH. But whatever those levers are that people are using, like whether it's pitching 50% Chico and 50% Sour Bissier, or whatever tricks they are, to optimize what those yeasts can do, versus a more control scenario where you're just pitching 100% Sour Bissier, or like you're not adding the extra sugar or whatever it is that people are using to dial those in. That could be interesting.
Yeah, and maybe by showing that I'm not really reading the website and I'm not watching the YouTube. I'm a pure podcast guy. So I'm not fully aware of all the things you've done, but I'm really thinking of yeast generations, and I don't know if there is any comparisons of a specific strain of at first generation and at 10th generation.
Yeah, that's actually one that we've been discussing, and I believe that Alex was aiming to do something like that, actually testing first generation versus fifth generation or something. And I don't know that ever happened, or at the very least it has been published. And Marshall might have done something like that like a decade ago. I did an experiment testing the effect of oxygenation on a nth generation liquid culture. And we had some observable impacts the non-oxygenated batch was much slower to ferment, and I think it finished higher. This was a cold lager fermentation, and but I believe that tasters, including myself, couldn't taste the difference. So the oxygen definitely improved the fermentation of a cold fermented lager, but it wasn't absolutely necessary to make a good beer if you had enough patience.
I feel like that's a common trend with a lot of the lager experiments is you're going to get a result that most tasters are going to be fine with either way. It's just a matter of how quick the turnaround on that product you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, when it comes to, some of this stuff like oxygen and stuff, I think it's like really good insurance and helps you if you have it, why not use it? You can make the best beer possible if you're pulling all your tricks out of your bag. But if you don't have yeast nutrient for the day or your oxygen tank ran out, it's probably going to be fine. I think that fermentation, temperature, and pitch rate are much more likely to make an impact. And that was actually one that we did was I did a pitch rate experiment, fermented cold, where one was an ale pitch rate and one was a lager pitch rate. And similar kind of situation, the ale pitch rate fermented slower, finished higher. They did not taste that different. Now, I still continue to pitch the right amount of yeast, but if it's a smidge off, I'm not as freaked out.
Yeah, that is really what I've taken from Brülosophy also is that most of the things I do is for insurance. It will become beer either way, and many of the things I don't worry that much, to put it in that way. If something goes a little bit wrong, I don't worry that much. But I always try to do everything to make as good a beer as possible. Don't worry that much anymore.
Keeping things sanitized, goes a long way.
Oh yeah.
I tried PMB for the first time on a pale ale, and it was a huge difference, like wild.
For the purposes of oxygen mitigation, when did you add it?
I was talking to the brew club did a thing, and I was talking with Alex, and he said he put it in with his gelatin. So I tried that, and holy crap, man! I like it was insane. Even when I cleaned the fermentation keg, like I think I left it in the firm chamber, and I cleaned it like 3 days later, and that smelled amazing.
So it improved the beer, you thought?
Oh, huge!
Wow,
especially aroma, and that, it's still carbonating right now, but that the sample, I've never had that kind of hop punch. It was crazy. It was a huge, completely game-changing experience for me. I mean, I will see if it keeps happening. It's anecdotal, but wow, it was. I'm gonna keep doing that. Yeah.
Wow.
I did it on a rye ale too that didn't have a lot of hop presence, but you could even tell the difference between the previous batch and the most recent batch when it came to oxygenation. It really does help.
Yeah, I one time had a clogged dip tube actually, and so it got to the point where I had to get my old racking cane out and try to rack the hops out of the fermentation keg, or rack the beer off the hops out of the fermentation keg into a serving keg, and I added SMB due to the extreme amount of oxidation that it was occurring, and it was kind of sulfury, the effect. And they say that you shouldn't get sulfur, but I did that time for sure. So I have not been messed around with adding that stuff. I've just been trying to. I do add Brutan B to the mash and the boil, and obviously taking extreme cold side measures from a physical, operational standpoint, but not chemical. So yeah, maybe Brutan B is sufficient, or maybe I'm missing out on something, and maybe I should be revisiting these metabisulfates.
Have you tried using the Camden instead of the the SMB?
Because, and the thing, we don't need Camden in our water because our water's so pure here. So I'm not having to adjust the water purity via Camden. So haven't really messed around with that from an oxygen perspective.
Yeah, I just had it. Like those guys were talking about it, and I had a whole bunch of Camden from like when I bought a bunch of gear off of a guy that I never used it, and so I chucked a half a Camden tablet in with the gelatin. And I've always done kind of what you do with the dry hop, where I take the lid off, pour the gelatin in, and then purge it. And yeah, I don't know, man. Like I said, it was a huge difference for me.
Yeah, I need to give this a try. And that could be an interesting experiment. Is I don't know if we've done that on an IPA or not. I'll have to look into that. Because I'm always scheming for experiments I can use for IPAs, because a lot of these variables that we test, ostensibly an IPA isn't the best canvas for it. And so I'm always trying to think of things that we can truly justify testing out on a hoppy beer to see if it actually makes a difference in a hoppy beer format.
Jordan, I know we're about out of time, but what did you say contributed to the sulfuring when you had that clogged dip tube? I think I missed a critical
I
point.
added SMB to mitigate the oxidation that was occurring, and it was a sulfur bomb. So maybe I used too much, but I was following the instructions for what I thought I was supposed to use.
No, the beer that I just did this with, it was sulfury for about 3 or 4 days, and it settled out, which was really interesting. So I just wanted to comment on that. There's something to what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a good point. I guess sulfur can be blown off when it's created via fermentation. So if it's from a chemical additive, maybe you could blow that off too.
There were a lot of purges. I mean, it was a high force carbonation beer, so we probably cleared it out of the tank. But it was definitely present for a while.
Well,
okay. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And thanks so much for being Patreons. Really appreciate you guys. Couldn't be here without you guys. And my email is jordan@brülosophy.com. So feel free to shoot me a note if you ever have any other questions. And thanks for coming out, and looking forward to seeing you guys out there.
Thanks again to Jordan for taking the time to do this session, as well as to all of our amazing patrons who believe in and enjoy what it is we're doing enough to throw a few bucks our way so that we can continue doing this. I absolutely mean it when I say that we would not be here today if it weren't for our patrons. So if you're listening now, you have them to thank for that. If you're interested in becoming a patron yourself, you can head over to patreon.com/Brülosophy to view all of the rewards we offer for helping us out. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel over at youtube.com/@TheBrülosophy Show. Martin is producing some awesome content that we're absolutely certain you're going to love. And remember to head over to Brülosophy.com to stay current on all the beer and brewing stuff we are up to. The Brülosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to Brülosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/Brülosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brülosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more.